picture this. It's 8 o'clock in the morning. A teenage boy is sitting alone in a dimly lit apartment. The kind of apartment where the furniture is mismatched, where the carpet has a stain near the door that nobody talks about anymore, where the window faces a brick wall instead of the sky. He's not doing anything dramatic. He's just watching TV. The news is on Fox News, volume low, the way you leave it when you're not really watching, just filling silence. He's still in his gray hoodie from the night before. His eyes are half open. He hasn't eaten yet. And then, a face appears on the screen. Korean man, mid-40s, sharp suit. The kind of man who looks like money even when he's standing still. He's smiling, this big, confident, camera-ready smile, and standing beside him is a teenage boy. Korean, clean-cut, dressed like he's already somebody. The interviewer leans forward and asks the man, "And is this your family?" The man puts his hand on the boy's shoulder, proudly, without a single flicker of hesitation. And he says, "Yes, this is my only son." 3 words. Only.
Son.
The boy watching from the apartment, the one in the gray hoodie, the one with the mismatched furniture, he goes completely still. His hand, which was lifting a glass of water, stops midair. Because that man on the television screen, he's not a stranger. He is this boy's father. A father who left before this boy ever learned to walk. A father who never sent a birthday card, never called, never looked back. And now, on national television, that same man is looking into the camera with his chest full of pride, calling somebody else's life the only one that matters. My only son. The glass of water hits the table. The boy just sits there. And something that took 16 years to build begins to crack. Stay with me, because this story, it doesn't go where you think it's going. Hold on. Before we go further, I need you to do something for me. Not subscribe, not share. Just scroll down to the comments real quick and type the number 16. That's how many years this boy went without hearing his father's voice. 16 years. If that number hits different for you, you already know why you're here. Subscribe. You belong on this channel. Now let's keep going. His name is Devian. Devian James Holloway, born in a hospital in Atlanta, Georgia, on a Tuesday in late October, during a rainstorm that knocked out power in 3 city blocks. His mother, Diane, labored through the dark with a single nurse holding a flashlight and whispering, "You're doing so well. Honey, you're doing so well." There was no father in that room. There was no father in the waiting area. There was no father anywhere nearby. And when the power came back on and the nurses recorded his birth, name of father left blank. A small white rectangle on the form that said everything a blank could possibly say. Diane looked down at the boy in her arms, this tiny, perfect, brown-skinned baby with just the faintest trace of something unfamiliar in the shape of his eyes, and she made a decision. She decided he would be enough. She decided she would be enough. What you need to understand about Diane is that she was not a woman who fell apart easily. She'd grown up in a single-parent home herself, raised by a grandmother in a 3-bedroom house in Decatur with 5 other cousins. She knew what it meant to need more than what was given. She knew how to make a way. She was 26 when she met him, Minjun Park, at a graduate school mixer that she'd only gone to because her coworker dragged her along and promised free food. Minjun was everything she hadn't expected. He wasn't flashy. He wasn't trying to impress anyone. He was standing near the bookshelf in the corner, holding a cup of something he clearly wasn't drinking, reading the titles on the spines like the party wasn't happening around him. When Diane walked over and pulled out the same book he was staring at, a worn copy of The Souls of Black Folk, he looked at her like she'd said something remarkable just by existing. They talked for 3 hours. By the end of the night, she had his number. By the end of the month, she had his heart. That's the part nobody tells you about stories like this. They don't begin with villains. They begin with people, real, complicated, wanting people, who fall into something true and beautiful before the world reminds them of all the reasons it can't last. Minjun was in America on a student visa, studying international business, funded almost entirely by his father back in Seoul. A powerful man named Park Sung-ho who had built a mid-sized technology firm into something that rivaled companies twice its age. Minjun was the heir apparent, the oldest son, the one the family had invested in, shaped, and quietly controlled for as long as he could remember. He'd never dated anyone outside his culture before, not because he didn't want to, but because nobody back home had ever suggested it was an option. With Diane, everything felt different. She laughed loudly and unapologetically. She argued with him about books and music and called him out when he said something wrong without embarrassing him. She cooked on Sundays and left the windows open, and the apartment always smelled like something good. He loved her. He genuinely, deeply loved her. But love, as Devian would eventually learn, is not always enough to make someone stay. Diane found out she was pregnant in the spring. She was 8 weeks along when she told Minjun over dinner. Not dramatically, not with candles or a speech. She just slid the test across the table and watched his face. He went very quiet. She'd prepared for surprise, for maybe even fear. What she had not prepared for was the way he looked past the test, past her, at something she couldn't see. Some invisible calculation happening behind his eyes. He said, "I need to call my father." She said, "Okay." That phone call lasted 47 minutes. She knows because she sat in the living room and counted the minutes on the clock, listening to Minjun speak Korean in the bedroom. His voice low and then rising and then dropping again in a way that made her stomach turn. When he came out, she already knew. She knew the way you know a storm is coming before the clouds arrive. Something in the air shifts. Something gets heavier. He sat down across from her, looked at the table. "My father says this can't happen," he said. She didn't ask him to repeat it. "He says if I acknowledge this child, if I marry you, I lose everything. The inheritance. My position. My place in the company. He's not asking me. He's telling me." Diane didn't cry. Not then. She felt something much colder than tears. "And what are you saying?" she asked.
Minjun looked over here.
And in his eyes, this is the part that haunted her for years. There wasn't cruelty. There wasn't indifference. There was devastation. Real, unmistakable devastation. Which somehow made it worse. "I don't know how to choose against everything I was built to be," he said. "I don't know how to walk away from my family, my country, my name. And I'm asking you to choose us," she said quietly. He couldn't look at her. That was her answer. 3 weeks later, Minjun Park returned to Seoul. He did not leave a forwarding address. He did not ask about the pregnancy. He sent one final message, a short paragraph, saying that he was sorry, that he hoped she would be okay, and that he prayed the child would have a good life. He never mentioned money. He never mentioned support. He never mentioned a name. Diane printed that message, folded it once, and put it in a shoebox at the back of her closet. She would not look at it again for 11 years. Devian was born in October, and Diane raised him alone. Children are perceptive in ways that adults underestimate. Devian didn't learn the word abandonment until the 7th grade. But he'd understood the concept since he was 4. Sitting in kindergarten drawing a family portrait with only 2 people in it while every other kid drew fathers, siblings, grandparents, pets. His teacher crouched beside him and said, very gently, "Don't you want to add anyone else?" Devian looked at the paper for a long moment. Then he shook his head. "There's nobody else," he said. Not sadly, just factually. That was the thing about Devian. Even as a small child, he didn't wear his pain like a wound. He wore it more like weather. Something you acknowledged, adapted to, and moved through. He asked his mother about his father exactly 3 times in his life. The first time he was 5. Diane was braiding her hair in the bathroom mirror, and he appeared in the doorway in his pajamas. "Mama, where's my daddy?" "He went back to his home, baby. Far away." Did he not want to come back? He had a hard choice to make, and he made it. Devian nodded. 5-year-old logic accepted this. He went back to bed. The second time was when he was 9, after a boy in class announced during lunch that Devian must be half Chinese or something, because of his eyes. Devian went home and stood in front of the bathroom mirror for a long time, studying his face. His mother's broad cheekbones. His mother's full lips. But the eyes, yes, there it was. Something narrower in the outer corners. Something that was not entirely hers. He found her in the kitchen.
Mama, ami koren.
Diane set the knife down slowly, like she was setting down something much heavier than steel. Sat at the kitchen table. Told him to sit across from her. And she told him the truth, a child-sized version of it. That his father was a Korean man named Minjun. That they had loved each other. That it was not Devian's fault. Had never been his fault. Would never be his fault. Devian listened to every word without expression. Then, does he know about me? Diane looked her son in the eyes. Yes, he knows. Devian nodded. Got up. Went to his room. She heard nothing from behind that door for the rest of the evening. Not crying. Not anger. Just silence. Which was, somehow, the loudest thing she'd ever heard. The third time Devian asked about his father, he was 14. And this time, it wasn't a question at all. He found the shoebox. He wasn't snooping. He was looking for the extra phone charger his mother kept in her closet. And the shoebox fell off the shelf when he moved a coat. The lid came loose. Inside, a few photographs. A movie ticket stub. A dried flower. Completely flattened and brown, unrecognizable as whatever it used to be. And a single folded piece of paper. Devian picked it up. He read it once, twice, 3 times. I hope the child will have a good life. The child. Not our child. Not your son. Not even a name. Just the child. An abstraction. A loose end. A problem delegated to someone else. Devian folded the paper back exactly the way he'd found it. Put it in the box. Put the lid on. Put the box back on the shelf. Then he went to the kitchen, poured himself a glass of water, sat down at the table and stared at the wall. His mother came home an hour later, tired, shoes in her hand, and found him sitting in the dark. She didn't ask questions. She just sat across from him. After a long while, Devian said, I read the letter. Diane didn't flinch. I know, she said. He called me the child. I know. He didn't even, Devian stopped, pressed his lips together. He didn't even give me a name. Diane reached across the table and put her hand over his. I gave you a name, she said. Devian. Because I needed you to know from the beginning that what you build with your own hands will always matter more than whose name you were born under. Devian looked at her, and for the first time in as long as either of them could remember, he let himself cry. Just briefly. Just enough. Then he wiped his face and said, okay, and went to his room to do his homework. Here is what abandonment can do to a person, if they let it. Can make them small. Make them spend their whole life shrinking themselves into apologies, convincing themselves they weren't worth staying for, recreating the rejection over and over with every relationship they touch. Devian refused. This is not a story about a boy who was destroyed by what his father did. This is a story about a boy who decided quietly, stubbornly, without announcement, that the absence of one man's love would not become the ceiling of his entire life. By the time he hit high school, Devian was the kind of student that teachers remembered. Not because he was the loudest in the room. He was the one who asked the questions nobody else thought to ask. The one who stayed after class not because he needed help, but because he genuinely wanted to know more. He read obsessively. History, psychology, economics, biographies. He was fascinated by people who had been told no by life and found a different door. He also started to teach himself Korean. Not because he wanted to find his father. He was clear about that. He did it because it was half of who he was. Because one day at a Korean cultural festival in Atlanta, he'd stood in front of a calligraphy demonstration and felt something deep in his chest respond to it. This pull, like the culture was already inside him and was just waiting to be invited out. His teacher noticed the Duolingo streak. 1,200 days. You speak Korean? Getting there, he said. She told him about a summer cultural exchange program in Seoul. He applied without telling his mother. When he got in on a partial scholarship, he sat with the letter for 20 minutes before showing her. Diane read it. Seoul, she said. Seoul, he confirmed. Something flickered across her face. Then she folded the letter back neatly and said, We'll figure out the rest of the money. She worked an extra 3 weekends to cover the gap. Devian went to Seoul. But before he ever set foot on Korean soil, there was the morning that changed everything. The morning of the television. Let's go back. It was a Thursday, 2 months before the end of junior year. Devian had fallen asleep on the couch with the TV still on. He woke to the morning news, that gray, half-conscious kind of waking where you're aware of the world before you're really in it. The segment was a business feature. Korean tech companies expanding into American markets. The kind of thing he would normally tune out. Then the camera cut to a live interview. A man in a navy suit, late 40s, distinguished, the practiced warmth of someone who'd done 100 interviews before. The host was talking about legacy, what it meant to build something that would outlast you. And the man smiled, this particular smile with one corner slightly higher than the other, and gestured toward the edge of the frame. The camera pulled back. A boy, 16, 17, Korean, dressed in a fitted blazer, poised, standing beside the man the way a son stands beside a father, like it's the most natural position in the world. And is this your family? The man's hand went to the boy's shoulder. Yes, this is my only son. Devian's entire nervous system lit up. The cheerin at the bottom of the screen read, Park Min-jae-yoon, CEO, Park Global Technologies. Park Min-yoon. The name from the letter. The name his mother had said at the kitchen table when he was 9. Now here he was, on national television, smiling, with his hand on his only son's shoulder. Devian didn't move. The apartment was completely silent except for the television. And the television was saying things he couldn't hear anymore because the blood in his ears was too loud. He thought about the letter. I hope the child will have a good life. He thought about his mother working hotel shifts so he could go to Seoul. He thought about every parent-teacher night she attended alone, every school play, every birthday cake. And he thought about this man, standing on a national broadcast, being celebrated, being admired, holding a son that the whole world was allowed to know about. My only son. Devian reached forward and turned off the television. He sat in the silence for a very long time. Then he opened his laptop, and he started to research Park Min-joon. Park Min-joon wasn't just successful. He was a story, the kind business media loved, second-generation wealth multiplied. Park Global Technologies, headquartered in Seoul with offices in Singapore, London, and, Devian had to read this twice, Atlanta. Atlanta, the same city where Devian was born. The same city where his mother still worked 2 jobs. The man had offices 20 minutes from their apartment and had never once reached out. Devian kept reading. An interview from a Korean business magazine spoke of Min-joon's traditional family values, raising his son to carry on the Park legacy. How the best inheritance a father could leave was not money but discipline, integrity, and purpose. Discipline, integrity, purpose. The irony was so sharp it could cut glass. He found a photo gallery, charity galas, industry conferences. Min-joon with his wife, Ji-yeon, elegant and composed, and their son, Park Seo-joon. Seo-joon, the heir, the legitimate one, the only one. Devian looked at the photo for a long time. Seo-joon was maybe a year younger than him. He had his father's jawline, and somewhere in the bone structure, just slightly, something that reminded Devian of his own face in the mirror. He closed the laptop. This is the moment in this kind of story where people expect an explosion. They expect Devian to confront his mother in a rage, to spiral, to go to his father's Atlanta office and cause a scene, to do something destructive and loud and justified. He didn't. And the reason he didn't is the whole point of this story. Devian sat with what he knew for 2 days. He went to school. He came home. He ate. He slept. He did his homework. And on the inside, he was dismantling and rebuilding something fundamental about how he understood the world. On the 3rd day, he went into his mother's room and sat on the edge of her bed. She muted the TV. I saw him on the news. She didn't ask who. He has a son, Devian said. He called him his only son. I know. I saw. You saw. I've been keeping track of him for years, she said. Not obsessively. Just enough to know he was still out there. Enough to know what he built. Why didn't you tell me? Because I didn't want your story to be about him. I wanted it to be about you. Devian looked at his mother, really looked at her, at the tiredness around her eyes that never fully went away, at the strength in her hands, at the life she had built in the space left behind by someone else's cowardice. Are you angry? He asked. She thought about it, really thought about it. I was, for a long time, but anger like that is like carrying a fire inside you. Keeps you warm for a while, and then it just burns. What do you feel now? She looked at her son. Proud. All I feel now is proud. I'm stopping right here for just a second. Not to break the moment, but because of it. If you've made it this far, you are not a casual viewer. You are the kind of person who feels things, who sits with stories, who understands that a boy going quiet in his room is sometimes louder than a boy who screams. So I have one thing to ask. Not to subscribe, you handled that already. You're a person of culture. This is different. Go to the comments right now, while this is still sitting in your chest, and finish this sentence. The part that got me was, that's it. Just that one sentence. Because here's what I've learned making these videos. The comments section isn't feedback. It's proof. Proof that real stories about real pain still reach real people. Every comment you leave is someone else scrolling at 2 a.m. thinking, wait, other people feel this too. That matters more than the algorithm ever will. The part that got me was, drop it below, and then let's finish this together. Devian applied to the summer exchange program. Got in. Flew to Seoul. He didn't go looking for his father. He went looking for himself. There's a difference, and it matters enormously. He stayed with a host family in the Mapo district. Warm, slightly chaotic. A grandmother who insisted on feeding him every 40 minutes, and a younger host brother named Jiho who spoke decent English and immediately adopted Devian as a human curiosity. Your Korean is good, Jiho told him on the first day, in Korean, testing him. Yours is better, Devian replied, in Korean. Jiho laughed for about 30 seconds straight. They became close quickly. Jiho showed him the real city, street food at 1 a.m., Han River at sunset, convenience stores that were somehow the coziest places on earth. Norbang on a Friday night where Devian discovered that singing badly with people you've just met is one of the fastest ways to become friends. But Seoul was doing something else to him too. It was filling in a part of himself he hadn't known was empty. The food tasted familiar in a way he couldn't explain. He looked at the city and felt both foreign and claimed. He walked through markets and temples and subway stations and thought, this is half of where I come from. Not his father's half. Not the abandonment half. The culture half. The history. The language. The people. He started writing in a journal. Long entries every night, working through what it meant to be biracial and belong fully to neither space and completely to both. Working through the anger at his father. Yes, it was there, he wasn't pretending, and trying to find what lay on the other side of it. One afternoon in week 3, Jiho's mother asked him over dinner why he had chosen Korea for his exchange. Devian was quiet for a moment. Then he said, in Korean, my father is Korean. He left before I was born. I came here to understand the part of myself that came from this place, without needing him to give it to me. The table went silent. Jiho's grandmother set down her chopsticks. And then she said something Devian would write down and carry with him for the rest of his life. That is the bravest kind of knowing. To claim your roots without needing the one who abandoned them to hand them to you. Devian didn't cry at the table. He waited until he got back to his room. And then he cried for a long time. Not from sadness. From something that felt impossibly like relief. In week 5, on a Saturday afternoon, Devian was walking through Gangnam when he stopped in front of a building. A modern glass tower. A lobby you could see straight through. On the wall beside the entrance, in clean silver letters, Park Global Technologies, Seoul headquarters. He had not planned this. He'd come to Gangnam with Jiho for a bookstore, took a wrong turn, and somehow here he was, standing in front of his father's building. He stood there for 4 minutes. He counted. Then he turned around and walked back the way he came. Because he wasn't ready. Not yet. Not like this, not as a boy who stumbled onto a sidewalk and got emotional. Not as somebody's surprise. Not as a problem to be managed. If the day ever came when he stood in front of Park Min-joon, it would be on his own terms. As someone who had already become something. He went back to the bookstore, found Jiho in the travel section, bought a book on Korean economic history, a collection of Korean poetry, and a small calligraphy set. And he went home, back in Atlanta, senior year. Devian came home from Seoul different, not louder, not angrier, just more settled. The way a person looks when they've answered a question they've been carrying for years. He wrote his college personal essay about growing up biracial, about Seoul, about finding belonging in a culture your absent parent never offered you. His guidance counselor read it and said, quietly, "This is the best personal statement I've read in 20 years. He applied to 5 schools, got into 4. He chose a business program at Georgia Tech, full ride honors track, because he had decided somewhere between Seoul and home that if his father had built an empire and chosen that empire over his own son, then Devian would build something too. Not to compete, not to impress, but because the world had tried to tell him he was a loose end. A footnote, a child who didn't make the official family photo. And he had something to say about that. Let's talk about Diane for a moment, because she deserves more than a supporting role. Diane Holloway was 37 years old when Devian got his scholarship. She had spent 16 years making herself smaller so that her son could be larger. Not out of martyrdom. She would have bristled at that word. Out of love. Simple, decided, load-bearing love. Devian had once asked her, in high school, if she was lonely. She considered the question seriously. Sometimes. But you know what I'm not? Bitter. And I've decided that's worth more. When the scholarship letter came, she sat at that kitchen table, the same one where she told him the truth about his father, where he'd shown her the soul letter, where every conversation that ever mattered had happened, and she cried. Full, uncomplicated, joyful tears. You did that, she said. Every bit of that was you. It was us, he said. She shook her head. I kept the lights on. You did the work. Don't confuse the two. That was Diane. Even in her proudest moment, making sure her son owned his own victory. The summer before college, Devian found Min-joon's professional contact email on the Park Global Technologies website. He wrote a message. 6 drafts before he sent it. The first was long and raw. The second cold and formal. By the 6th, he'd found the version that was true. 3 paragraphs. My name is Devian Holloway. My mother is Diane Holloway. I was born in Atlanta in October. I believe you know who I am. I am not writing to ask for anything. I am not writing to create a problem for you or your family. I am writing because I spent 16 years wondering if I would have the courage to tell you that I exist, that I know what you said on television, and that your words did not break me. They clarified something. I start college in the fall. I am going to build something. You will hear my name one day, not because I need you to, but because that's simply what's going to happen. I thought you should know that the child you left behind turned out to be someone extraordinary. My mother made sure of that. He read it one final time. Press send. 3 days passed. A week. 2 weeks. No reply. He hadn't expected one. But he'd needed to say it. And in the saying of it, something in his chest, something wound tight since that morning in front of the television, finally loosened. Not because the wound healed, but because it no longer had power over him. 6 weeks later, 3 weeks into freshman orientation, his phone buzzed. An email from minjoon.park@parkglobaltech.com. Devian stared at the notification for a full minute before he opened it. 9 sentences. Short, but every one mattered. Devian, I have read your message many times. I do not expect you to believe this, and you have no reason to. But I have thought about you every year. The choice I made was the worst decision of my life. I have known this for a long time. I am not asking for forgiveness. I am not asking for a relationship. I understand I forfeited any right to either. I only want to say this. Your mother is the finest person I have ever known. And the fact that she raised you, I can hear it in every word you wrote. I am sorry. I am deeply, genuinely sorry. I know that is not enough.
Min-yun.
Devian read it twice, put his phone down, picked it back up, read it again. He felt, and this surprised him, not anger, not vindication, something quieter. He felt seen, not by a father, not in the way a father is supposed to make a son feel seen. It was too late for that, and both of them knew it. But by a man who had finally, after 16 years, looked directly at what he had done. Devian wrote back one line. Thank you for saying that. Take care of yourself. Set the phone down. Went back to his textbooks. Devian Holloway goes to college. Studies hard. Makes friends. Falls in love with economics and with a girl from Houston who calls him out every time he's too in his head. He discovers he has a gift for strategy, for looking at a broken system and seeing exactly where the lever is that would move it. He interns at a startup his junior year. By senior year, he's doing the work of someone 3 years ahead. By graduation, 2 job offers and an idea for a company, written in a notebook with Devian. On the cover, no last name, just his first, the one Diane gave him, the one that means something. He calls his mother every Sunday. She's moved up, managing a medical billing department now, 10 people under her. She took one solo trip to Paris, which she'd talked about for 20 years, and sent Devian approximately 40 photos of food. He framed one and hung it above his desk. Min-jun Park never appears in Devian's life again in any meaningful way. The wound is too old, the distance too established. Devian, who is wise beyond the things that hurt him, knows that some doors close for a reason. But one evening, he's 22, just launched his first small company. Sitting in an office that's truly just a rented room with a whiteboard and 2 second-hand chairs, he gets a notification. Park Global Technologies has made a significant investment in an Atlanta-based tech incubator. The city where Devian was born. The city where his mother raised him alone. He reads the announcement, sees the name, sits with it for a moment, then closes the article, and opens his business plan. He has work to do. Before we close, sit with this. Because this story isn't just about Devian. It's about every person who was told by absence, by silence, by a blank on a form where a name should be, that they didn't count, that they were a loose end, that they were someone else's footnote. It's about every mother who worked 2 jobs and kept going. Every kid who studied in a dim apartment and decided that the world's low expectations were not their responsibility to meet. Abandonment is real. The pain of it is real. If you felt it from a parent, a partner, a person who was supposed to stay and didn't, I'm not going to minimize that. It is one of the most gutting things a human being can experience. But it is not your ceiling. The man who called another boy his only son on national television had no idea what he was doing in that moment. He had no idea that 30 blocks away, in a dimly lit apartment, the boy he'd erased was watching, absorbing, deciding. He had no idea he was speaking into the beginning of someone extraordinary. Devian turned off the television. And then he turned on. That is the story. That has always been the story. The people who were abandoned, overlooked, written off, the ones who were handed nothing and chose to build anyway, they are not the exception. They are the point. If the story moved you, share it. Someone out there needs to hear it today. And if you're sitting somewhere right now feeling like someone's blank, like you were someone's unfinished sentence, I want you to know, you are not a loose end. You are the whole story.